In a small town where winter's bite cuts deep, Mike Anderson's auto repair shop barely keeps its doors open. The aging mechanic's calloused hands tell stories of 30 years fixing cars for whatever his customers can afford. On this bitter December evening, as snow blankets the streets, he discovers a young girl collapsed in a roadside ditch, her wheelchair overturned beside her. Without hesitation, he carries her to safety, warms her frozen limbs, and repairs her damaged wheelchair, refusing any payment but her grateful smile. Little does he know that this simple act of kindness will set in motion events that will transform both their lives forever. Could this chance encounter in the snow lead to something extraordinary? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Mike Anderson's day always began the same way. Instant coffee in a chipped mug, steam rising into the cold air of his office as he thumbed through the worn pages of his ledger. The morning sun barely penetrated the frost-etched windows of Anderson. Auto repair, casting long shadows across the concrete floor where a lifetime of oil stains told their own stories. His weathered fingers traced the columns of numbers, each entry representing more than just dollars and cents. Mrs. Henderson's transmission repair. She'd paid in weekly installments of $20, bringing fresh-baked bread with each payment. Tom Wilson's brake job. Partial payment accepted in the form of fresh eggs from his farm. The Martinez family's radiator replacement, still outstanding, but how could he press them when their youngest was fighting leukemia? The ledger's coffee-stained pages revealed the truth of his situation. The numbers didn't add up, hadn't for months now. Bills mounted like the snowdrifts outside his garage doors. The bank's latest notice lay unopened on his desk, its crisp white envelope a stark contrast to the grease-smudged paperwork surrounding it. "Another day," he muttered, running a hand through his silver-streaked hair. The ancient shop heater clanked to life, its familiar rhythm a comfort in the pre-dawn quiet. Mike pulled on his well-worn work jacket, the name Anderson embroidered above the breast pocket faded but still legible after all these years. The phone rang, its sharp trill cutting through his morning reverie. "Anderson Auto," he answered, voice gravelly from disuse. "Mike, thank God you're there." Betty Walsh's voice trembled on the other end. "My car won't start, and I've got to get Tommy to his doctor's appointment in the city." "Where are you parked?" He was already reaching for his tools. "In my driveway." "But Mike, I can't pay you right now. The insurance—" "Betty, let's worry about that later. Tommy needs to see his doctor." He grabbed his mobile toolkit, the one his father had given him when he first opened the shop. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. Outside, the December wind bit through his jacket. His old pickup truck, reliable as sunrise, started on the first. Try despite the bitter cold. As he pulled out of the garage, his headlights swept across the "No Job Too Small" sign hanging crooked by the entrance. His father's words echoed in his memory. "Son, in this business you're not just fixing cars, you're helping people get where they need to go." Betty's house was only a few blocks away, a modest, single story with Christmas lights already strung. Across the porch, despite the early date, Tommy's wheelchair ramp, the one the community had pitched in to build last summer, was dusted with fresh snow. Mike found the problem quickly enough. A dead battery, killed by the cold snap. He had a spare in his truck, one he'd been saving for his own vehicle, but Tommy's appointment couldn't wait. Within 20 minutes, Betty's car hummed to life. "Mike, I don't know how to thank you," Betty began, her eyes welling up. "When I get my next disability check, we'll figure something out," he said, closing the hood. "You just make sure Tommy gets to that appointment." As he watched them drive away, Mike pulled out his small notepad, another coffee-stained ritual, and added Betty's battery to his growing list of outstanding accounts. The morning sun was fully up now, painting the snow-covered street in shades of gold and rose. In an hour, the regular customers would start trickling in. Jeff with his mysterious engine knock, Maria and her squealing brakes, old Pete who just liked to stop by and talk cars while nursing a cup of coffee. Back in his office, Mike finally opened the bank notice. The words "final warning" and "foreclosure" jumped out at him, but he tucked it into his ledger without reading further. There would be time for worry later. Right now, someone's mother needed to get her son to the doctor, and in Mike's world, that meant more than any column of red numbers. He pulled on his work gloves, the leather soft and cracked from years of use. Through the garage door windows, he could see the first customer of the day pulling in, exhaust smoke billowing in the cold air. Mike straightened his shoulders and reached for the door switch. The day was just beginning, and there were people who needed him. Sarah Thompson pressed her palm against the cool metal of her wheelchair's armrest, feeling the slight wobble that had developed over the past few weeks. The chair had been a constant companion for 12 years, ever since the accident that took her father and left her unable to walk. Now, at 17, she'd learned to navigate her world with determined grace, even as the wheelchair's joints protested with each turn. From her bedroom window, she watched her mother Claire scraping ice off their car's windshield, the morning sun catching the silver strands in her dark hair. They'd grown there early, those grey streaks, in the years after Sarah's father died. A single mother's salary at the local diner barely covered their modest ranch house rent, let alone the mounting medical bills that arrived with steady persistence. "Mom," Sarah called out, wheeling herself to the front door, "you forgot your gloves again." She held up the worn wool pair she kept warm on the radiator. Claire's tired face brightened at her daughter's thoughtfulness. "What would I do without you keeping track of me?" She came up the ramp, its wood weathered and in need of fresh paint, to retrieve the gloves. "Probably freeze your fingers off," Sarah teased, but her eyes caught the worry lines around her mother's mouth. "Is everything okay?" "Just the usual morning rush," Claire answered too quickly, tugging on the gloves. "Mrs. Peterson wants her usual breakfast special right at opening, and you know how she gets if her toast is even slightly too brown." But Sarah knew the real reason for her mother's distraction. The Medicare letter had arrived yesterday, denying coverage for a new wheelchair. Her current one, a basic manual model that had served her through middle school and most of high school, was showing its age. The right wheel made a clicking sound with each rotation, and the frame had developed a concerning creak. "I've been thinking," Sarah said, following her mother into their small kitchen where the linoleum was peeling at the corners. "Maybe I could get a part-time job after school. The library is looking for someone to help with their computer catalog system." Claire stopped gathering her things for work, turning to face her daughter. "Absolutely not. Your job is to focus on school. Those straight A's are your ticket to college." She softened her voice. "We'll figure something out about the wheelchair. We always do." Sarah watched her mother leave for work, then wheeled herself to her desk, where her physics textbook lay open next to a notebook filled with sketches. Between calculus formulas and chemistry equations, she'd drawn dozens of wheelchair designs, some practical, others pure fantasy. Her current chair might be failing, but it had taught her valuable lessons about mechanics, about the way forces interacted, about the importance of good design. She ran her fingers over a recent drawing, a motorized chair with an innovative suspension system she'd conceived after a particularly bumpy ride down Main Street. The margins were filled with calculations and notes about materials, costs, power requirements. Her physics teacher, Mr. Roberts, had praised her technical intuition, encouraging her to pursue engineering in college. The wheelchair creaked as she shifted position, a sound she'd learned to interpret like a language. This particular groan meant the front caster was catching again, a problem that had been getting worse as winter set in. She'd tried fixing it herself, armed with YouTube tutorials and borrowed tools, but some repairs were beyond her current abilities. Outside, snow began falling again, thick flakes swirling past her window. Sarah thought about her mother, who would be on her feet all day at the diner, serving coffee and managing smiles despite her exhaustion. She thought about the college applications waiting to be submitted, the scholarships she'd need to secure, the dreams that seemed to float just beyond her reach, like the snowflakes beyond the glass. The wheelchair gave another protesting creak as she turned back to her desk. Sarah pulled out a fresh page in her notebook and began sketching again. Someday, she promised herself, she would design something better. Not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever felt limited by their mobility devices. Until then, she had her drawings, her calculations, and the quiet determination that had carried her through every obstacle life had placed in her path. She glanced at the clock. Her mother would be at work for another 8 hours. The snow was getting heavier, but Sarah had a physics club meeting after school, and she wasn't about to let a little bad weather stop her. She'd learned long ago that the key to independence was careful planning. She just hoped her wheelchair would hold together for one more winter. The snow had started falling harder by mid-afternoon, transforming from gentle flurries into thick, wind-driven sheets that cut visibility to mere feet. Mike stood at his garage door, watching the weather deteriorate as he wiped his hands on a red shop rag that had seen better days. His father's old toolkit sat open on the workbench behind him, tools gleaming dully in the fluorescent light, the same tools that had fixed thousands of cars over 3 decades. "You should head home early, Pete," he called to his elderly regular, who was nursing his 4th cup of coffee. "This storm's getting nasty." Pete shuffled to the door, clutching his thermos. "Reminds me of the blizzard of '82, he said, peering into the whiteness. "You be careful yourself, Mike. These are the kinds of nights that bring trouble." Mike nodded, though he had no intention of closing early. The Garcia family was counting on having their van back tonight. Their daughter's dialysis appointment couldn't wait for better weather. The wind howled outside, rattling the old building's metal siding. As Pete's taillights disappeared into the swirling snow, Mike returned to the van, his practiced hands moving methodically through the repair. The radio crackled with weather warnings, but he barely registered them, focused on his work. It was nearly 6 when he finished, the darkness outside absolute except for the cone of light from his shop's exterior lamp. He was reaching for the phone to call the Garcias when movement caught his eye through the snow-frosted windows. A shape that seemed wrong somehow, angular yet unsteady. Mike grabbed his heavy work coat and flashlight, pushing through the wind that tried to steal his breath. His boots crunched through fresh snow as he approached the road. The beam of his flashlight cut through the falling snow, catching a glimpse of metal reflecting back. Then he saw her. A teenage girl lay half buried in the roadside drift, her wheelchair toppled beside her. She wasn't moving. "Hey!" Mike's voice was lost in the wind as he rushed forward, heart pounding. His knees protested as he knelt in the snow, checking for signs of life. The girl's face was pale, lips tinged blue, but she was breathing. Her hands, bare against the cold, were curled into rigid claws. "Can you hear me?" He touched her shoulder gently. Her eyes fluttered open, confusion and fear mixing in her gaze. "My chair," she managed through chattering teeth. "The wheel caught." Mike glanced at the wheelchair. Even in the poor light, he could see where the loose caster had finally failed completely, sending the chair and its occupant into the ditch. Without hesitation, he shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around her. "I'm Mike Anderson, the mechanic. Here, I'm going to get you inside where it's warm." He spoke calmly, though his mind was racing. "What's your name?" "Sarah," she stuttered, her whole body trembling violently now. "Okay, Sarah. I'm going to lift you up. The garage is just 30 feet away." He carefully slipped one arm under her knees, the other behind her shoulders. "Hold on to my neck if you can." She managed a weak grip as he lifted her. Even through his thermal shirt, he could feel how cold she was. The wheelchair would have to wait. The girl needed warmth immediately. Fighting against the wind, Mike carried Sarah to the garage. His back screamed in protest, but 30 years of lifting engine blocks had given him strength that even age couldn't fully diminish. He shouldered through the door, making straight for the small office where his ancient but reliable heater worked overtime. "Almost there," he encouraged, feeling her shivering against him. The thermometer by his desk read 10 degrees Fahrenheit, and she'd been out there God knew how long. His first aid training from his army days kicked in. She needed to warm up slowly to prevent shock. Only after he'd settled her in his office chair, wrapped in every blanket he could find, did Mike return for the wheelchair. His flashlight revealed the extent of the damage. The caster wheel had broken clean off and the frame was twisted from the fall. But that was a problem for later. Right now, the girl in his office needed help. As he dragged the damaged chair, inside, Pete's words echoed in his mind. These are the kinds of nights that bring trouble. But looking at the wheelchair's worn edges and jury-rigged repairs, Mike had a feeling this particular trouble had been a long time coming. The old shop heater chugged valiantly against the cold, its orange coils glowing like a sunset in the dimness of Mike's office. Sarah sat wrapped in blankets, her color slowly returning as warmth crept back into her limbs. Steam rose from the mug of hot chocolate Mike had scrounged from his bottom drawer, and forgotten Christmas gift from a grateful customer. Small sips, Mike reminded her, watching as feeling returned to her fingers. He'd seen hypothermia before, during his military service, and knew the dangers of warming too quickly. Your mum's on her way. Roads are bad, though, so it might take her a while. Sarah nodded, her hands steadier now around the mug. I'm sorry to be so much trouble, she said, voice stronger than it had been in the snow. The chair. It's been acting up for weeks, but we couldn't afford... She trailed off, embarrassed. Mike was already examining the wheelchair he'd brought in, his experienced hands moving over the damaged frame. Looks like this caster assembly's been ready to go. For a while. See these stress marks? He pointed to telltale cracks in the metal. And someone's tried to reinforce it with zip ties and duct tape, Sarah finished, a hint of pride mixing with her sheepishness. I watched some repair videos online. It was working mostly. Mike looked up, surprised by the technical knowledge in her voice. You did this yourself? Had to. Mom works double shifts just to keep up with regular bills. Sarah took another sip of hot chocolate. I've been trying to learn basic maintenance. The chair's manual might as well be in Greek, but physics helps. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, right? A smile creased Mike's weathered face. Newton's third law. Didn't expect to hear that in my garage tonight. He pulled his tool cart closer, the familiar weight of his father's wrench comfortable in his hand. Tell you what, while we wait, for your mom, want to learn how to properly fix that caster? Sarah's eyes lit up. Really? But don't you have other work to do? Mike glanced at the Garcia's van, ready for pickup. Nothing that can't wait a few minutes. Besides, he gestured to the heater, Doc's orders say you need to warm up slowly. Might as well make the time useful for the next hour as the storm raged outside. Mike guided Sarah through the basics of wheelchair maintenance. She proved to be a quick study, asking intelligent questions about torque and stress points that made him wish he'd paid more attention in his own high school physics class. The trick is, he demonstrated, adjusting the tension on a bearing, you've got to think about the whole system, not just the broken part. Everything's connected. Like in a car? Sarah asked, leaning forward to see better. Exactly like a car, or a body, or pretty much anything worth fixing. Mike stepped back, admiring their work. Want to test it? Sarah's expression turned hesitant. I can't feel my feet very well yet. No rush, Mike said quickly, understanding, dawning. Heater's doing its job, but we'll give it more time. He pulled up his work stool, its leather cracked, but still serviceable. Meanwhile, want to hear about the time I had to fix a Cadillac with nothing but a paperclip and a stick of gum? Sarah laughed, the sound warming the garage better than any heater could. That's not possible. Oh, no. Well, it was back in '92. Mike launched into the story, one of his favorites, watching as Sarah relaxed further into her blanket cocoon. The fear from earlier had faded from her eyes, replaced by genuine interest as he described his makeshift repair. When headlights finally cut through the snow-filled windows, announcing Claire Thompson's arrival, Mike was finishing up a tale about a mysterious engine rattle that turned out to be a squirrel's secret nut stash. Sarah! Claire burst through the door in a swirl of snowflakes, her diner uniform still visible under her coat. Baby, are you okay? She rushed to her daughter, hands checking for injury. "I'm fine, Mum," Sarah assured her. "Mr. Anderson found me before things got too bad. And look, we fixed my chair." Mike stood, suddenly awkward in the face of Claire's tearful gratitude. "Just happened to be in the right place," he said. "And please, it's Mike. Mr. Anderson was my father. I don't know how to thank you," Claire began, but Mike was already shaking his head. "No thanks needed." Though he glanced at Sarah, seeing the spark of curiosity still bright in her eyes. "If Sarah's interested, she's welcome to come by and learn more about repairs. Seems she's got a knack for it." The smile that spread across Sarah's face was warmer than any summer day. The engineering magazine had been left behind by a customer months ago, forgotten on the break room table until Sarah discovered it during one of her after-school visits. Its glossy pages were dog-eared and coffee-stained, but the articles about breakthrough medical devices and adaptive technologies caught her attention immediately. "What's this?" she asked Mike, who was elbow-deep in an engine nearby. She held up a page showing a prototype exoskeleton. "They're using car suspension principles in prosthetic limbs." Mike wiped his hands and came over to look. "Engineering's engineering," he said, pointing to a diagram. "Whether it's a shock absorber on a Chevy or an artificial knee joint, you're dealing with the same basic physics. Speaking of which, how'd you do on that test?" 98%, Sarah beamed. "Mr. Roberts said my extra credit answer about friction coefficients in wheel bearings was unusually practical." "That's my girl," Mike grinned, then caught himself. The words had slipped out naturally after 2 months of these afternoon sessions, but still, Sarah didn't seem to notice, already absorbed in another article. "Look at this. They're developing smart materials that can change properties based on electrical current. Imagine if a wheelchair could adapt to different terrains automatically." Her enthusiasm was infectious. Over the past weeks, Mike had watched her confidence grow alongside her mechanical knowledge. What had started as basic maintenance lessons had evolved into wide-ranging discussions about engineering principles, design theory, and the future of adaptive technology. "You know," Mike said, settling onto his work stool, "your chair's due for a bearing check. Want to try something new today?" Sarah looked up eagerly. "The ceramic bearings you mentioned last week?" "Better." Mike reached under his workbench and pulled out a small box. "These are experimental bearings from my supplier. They're testing a new polymer coating that reduces friction by almost 30%. Not approved for automotive use yet, but perfect for a wheelchair test." "Run!" Sarah finished, eyes shining. She wheeled closer to examine the bearings. "We could do comparative performance tests, document the wear patterns, maybe even—" She trailed off, reaching for her ever-present notebook. Mike watched as she sketched rapidly, adding notes and calculations in her neat handwriting. The page quickly filled with ideas spawned by the magazine articles. Modifications to her chair's frame, improvements to the wheel hub design, even a rough concept for a new type of brake system. "You really love this stuff, don't you?" Mike asked softly. Sarah paused in her sketching, suddenly serious. "When I was little, right after the accident, I hated depending on the chair. Hated being different." She touched the magazine's cover gently, "But now I'm starting to see it differently. Every problem with this chair isn't just an inconvenience, it's an opportunity to make something better. Not just for me, but for everyone who needs one." Mike nodded, understanding. He'd seen that same fire in his own father's eyes years ago, that drive to fix things, to improve them, to help people through mechanical ingenuity. "Well then," he said, picking up a wrench, "let's get to work on those bearings. Can't revolutionize wheelchair design if we don't understand the basics, right?" They worked together through the afternoon, the garage filled with the sounds of tools and eager questions. Sarah absorbed everything. The importance of precision, the need to think 3 steps ahead, the satisfaction of solving mechanical puzzles. When she wasn't working on her chair, she was reading the magazine, marking pages and making notes. As the sun began to set, Claire arrived to pick up her daughter. She paused in the doorway, watching Sarah enthusiastically explain her new bearing configuration to Mike. There was something different about her lately, a sense of purpose that went beyond just getting through each day. "Mom!" Sarah called, noticing her. "Can I leave the magazine here? Mike and I are going to try some of these design principles tomorrow." "Of course, honey." Claire caught Mike's eye, mouthing a silent "thank you." He shrugged modestly, but couldn't hide his proud smile as Sarah carefully marked her place in the magazine. After they left, Mike picked up the magazine, looking at Sarah's neat annotations in the margins. One note caught his eye: integration of automotive suspension concepts, massive potential breakthrough in wheelchair mobility. He placed the magazine carefully on his workbench, where it would wait for tomorrow's session. Sometimes, he thought, the most important fixes weren't mechanical at all. Sometimes they were about giving someone the tools to fix their own future. The graduation photo found its place of honor on Mike's office wall, tucked between his father's original business license and a dusty ASE certification. In it, Sarah beamed at the camera, her modified wheelchair gleaming under the June sun. Honor cords draped around her neck. But it was more than just a snapshot of a moment. It was a testament to the 1,000 small victories that had brought her there. There had been the Science Fair Triumph junior year, where her presentation on adaptive technology in personal mobility devices had won first place. Mike still remembered helping her build the display, his garage transformed into a makeshift workshop as they created working models to demonstrate her theories. "The judges won't know what hit them," he'd said, watching her practice her presentation for the 10th time. She'd modified her own wheelchair to serve as a demonstration platform, each improvement documented and analyzed with scientific precision. The local paper had covered her victory. "Local student revolutionizes wheelchair design." Mike had framed that article too, though Sarah protested it was premature to use the word revolutionizes. But her innovations were undeniable. The chair's improved suspension system alone had drawn attention from a medical equipment manufacturer. Then came the string of acceptance letters senior year. Mike had been in the garage that March afternoon when Sarah burst through the door, waving an envelope from MIT's School of Engineering. "They want me!" she'd exclaimed, her chair executing a perfect spin of joy. Full scholarship. Mike had to sit down, his emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "Of course they do," he'd managed, voice gruff with pride. "They'd be fools not to." Claire had arrived shortly after, still in her diner uniform, tears streaming down her face. The three of them had celebrated with root beer floats, a tradition Mike had started after Sarah's first successful major repair job. The photo didn't show any of that history, but Mike saw it all every time he looked at it. He saw the late afternoons, spent troubleshooting mechanical problems, the way Sarah's questions grew more sophisticated as her knowledge deepened. He saw the nights she'd stayed past closing, helping him with routine repairs while they discussed physics and engineering. "You're sure about Boston?" he'd asked one evening as they changed the oil in Mrs. Henderson's ancient Buick. "That's a long way from home." Sarah had paused, wrench in hand. "Scared you won't find another apprentice mechanic as good as me?" she'd teased, but then turned serious. "I have to go, Mike. The program they're doing groundbreaking work in assistive technologies. But I'll be back. There's something I want to build, something important, and I'll need your help." The graduation ceremony itself had been a triumph. Mike sat with Claire in the audience, both of them cheering perhaps a bit too loudly when Sarah's name was called. She'd insisted on wheeling herself across the stage, refusing the temporary ramp the school had offered. "My chair can handle a few stairs," she'd declared, demonstrating the modifications they'd spent months perfecting. Now, looking at the photo, Mike touched the frame gently. Sarah's last visit before leaving for college had been just yesterday. She'd brought him a gift, a new set of precision tools engraved with his name. "For when I come back with my big ideas," she'd said, eyes twinkling. "Can't build the future with rusty wrenches." The garage felt emptier without her regular presence, but evidence of her time there remained everywhere. The technical manuals she'd annotated, the prototype sketches pinned to the bulletin board, the special tool rack they'd designed together to accommodate her reach from the wheelchair. The photo captured none of these details, just a bright young woman on the cusp of her future. But for Mike, it represented something more. Proof that sometimes the most important repairs happen not to machines, but to the human spirit. Sarah had rolled into his garage that snowy night broken and cold, but she'd rolled out on graduation day with not just a fixed wheelchair, but a fixed purpose. He glanced at his father's old saying, hand-painted above the workbench, "No job too small." Sarah had added her own addition beneath it, in neat engineering script, "No dream too big." Mike smiled and turned back to his work. There were cars to fix, and somewhere in Boston, a brilliant young woman was beginning to build something extraordinary. He couldn't wait to see what she'd roll through his door with next. The first technical drawing arrived in Mike's mail 3 months into Sarah's freshman year at MIT. The paper was engineering grade, crisp and precise, but the familiar handwriting in the margins brought a smile to his face. She'd drawn a preliminary design for a new type of wheelchair motor housing, with notes scribbled everywhere. "Remember the bearing configuration from the Chevy timing belt? Could work here." Mike spread the drawing on his workbench. The same spot where Sarah had spent countless hours learning the basics. His fingers traced the innovative design elements. She'd taken everything they'd discovered together and elevated it to something entirely new. Their weekly phone calls had become a fixture of his Sunday evenings. "The professors here know so much," she'd enthuse, "but sometimes they overthink things. Remember how we solved the brake friction problem with that simple rubber compound? Well, yesterday, in advanced materials." He'd listen, understanding maybe half of the technical terms she now used fluently, but loving every minute of her excitement. She'd tell him about her classes, her projects, and most importantly, her evolving vision for what a wheelchair could be. "It's not just about mobility, Mike," she'd explained during one late-night call. "It's about dignity, independence. The chair shouldn't just move people, it should empower them." More drawings followed throughout her freshman year, each one more refined than the last, each incorporating lessons learned from their years of practical experience in the garage. Mike kept them all, carefully organized in a folder labeled Sarah's Future. During her first winter break, she'd wheeled into the garage as if she'd never left, immediately noticing the new hydraulic lift he'd installed. "Finally replaced that old death trap, huh?" "Well," he'd grinned, "someone kept nagging me about workplace safety regulations." They'd fallen easily back into their old rhythm, working side by side on cars while discussing her latest ideas. She'd brought her laptop, showing him 3D models of her designs. "See how the power transfer works? It's based on that transmission. Problem we solved for Mr. Johnson's Dodge." But it wasn't until her sophomore year that the real breakthrough came. The drawing arrived in a special delivery envelope, marked "Urgent Personal." Inside was the most detailed schematic yet, titled simply, "The Heart's Drive." "It came to me during advanced robotics," Sarah explained over the phone that night, her voice trembling with excitement. "We were studying adaptive control systems, and I suddenly remembered something you said years ago about cars being like bodies, everything connected, working together. What if we applied that principle to wheelchair design?" Mike studied the drawing as she talked. She'd created something revolutionary, a wheelchair that could learn from its users' movements, anticipate needs, and adjust in real time. The motor design incorporated elements from their old repair work, but transformed into something entirely new. "The frame uses that lightweight alloy we discussed," she continued, "but with a dynamic support structure that responds to different terrains. And look at the control system. Remember that old joystick we modified? This takes that concept to a whole new level." "Sarah," Mike said slowly, "this isn't just an improvement. This is a complete reimagining of what's possible." "I know," she replied softly, "and I couldn't have done it without you. Every car we fixed, every problem we solved, it all led to this. The professors here are excited, Mike. They think this could be something big." He heard the mixture of hope and anxiety in her voice, so familiar from their early days, working on her first wheelchair modifications. "Of course it's big. But more importantly, it's right. You're solving real problems for real people." "That's what you taught me," she said. "No job too small, remember?" After they hung up, Mike pinned the drawing of the Heart's Drive prominently above his workbench. Customers would ask about it, and he'd feel that same surge of pride every time he explained, That's Sarah's design. She's going to change everything." Late at night, after the garage was closed, he'd often find himself studying the drawing. His trained mechanic's eye could see how each element built upon their years of practical experience, transformed by Sarah's brilliant theoretical understanding into something entirely new. But more than that, he saw the heart of what they'd built together, not just a better wheelchair, but a better future. The drawing's edges were starting to curl slightly from the garage's humidity, but Mike didn't mind. Like all the best things, in his shop, it showed signs of being well-loved and full of promise. The bank notice arrived on a Tuesday, its official letterhead stark and uncompromising. Mike had seen these before, had even gotten good at ignoring them, but this one was different. Final notice of foreclosure blazed across the top in bold letters, followed by numbers that made his stomach clench. 90 days to pay or vacate the premises. He was still staring at the paper when his phone buzzed. Sarah's weekly call. For the first time in 3 years, he considered not answering, but habit and affection won out. "Mike's garage," he answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "You don't sound right," Sarah said immediately. 3 years at MIT hadn't dulled her ability to read him. "What's wrong?" "Nothing you need to worry about. How's the prototype coming?" He attempted to change the subject, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "Mike." Her tone was firm, reminiscent of how he used to say her name when she tried to hide a failed repair attempt. "Tell me." The dam broke. He found himself explaining everything. The mounting bills, the customers who couldn't pay, the repairs he'd done for free because people needed their cars to get to work or medical appointments, the property taxes he'd been struggling to keep up with, the bank's patience finally running out. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sarah's voice was soft, hurt. "All these years you've helped so many people. Let me help you. You're focusing on your studies, on your future. This is my problem to solve." He glanced around the garage at the lifetime of memories contained within its walls. "Maybe it's time anyway. Your father always said a good mechanic knows when. A repair costs more than a replacement." "Don't you dare!" The steel in Sarah's voice surprised him. "That garage isn't just a building. It's where dreams get fixed. How many people in town depend on you? How many kids have learned their first oil change there? How many times have you kept someone's only transportation running when they couldn't afford a regular shop?" Mike sat heavily in his office chair, the one where he'd first warmed Sarah up on that snowy night years ago. "The numbers don't lie, Sarah. 90 days, and this all goes to auction." There was a long pause, filled only with the sound of Sarah's breathing and the distant hum of her dorm room's heating system. When she spoke again, her voice had that tone he recognized, the one that meant she was seeing a solution he couldn't yet imagine. "The prototype is working, Mike, better than anyone expected. The adaptive control system, the terrain response, everything we theorized, it's all coming together. My professors say it's revolutionary. There's interest from medical device companies, serious interest. That's wonderful, but no buts. I've been keeping something from you too." She took a deep breath. "Remember that engineering competition I mentioned? We won. First place. The prize includes seed funding and meetings with potential investors. They want to see a full presentation next month." Mike's heart swelled with pride, despite his troubles. "Sarah, that's amazing. And I want to do it in your garage." "What?" "Think about it. Where better to demonstrate a breakthrough in mobility? technology than in the place where it was born. Every innovation in this design started with something we figured out together, fixing cars and chairs in that garage. It's not just a story about technology, it's a story about heart. About a mechanic who took the time to teach a scared teenage girl that broken things could be fixed, that limitations were just problems, waiting for solutions. Mike looked at the bank notice again, seeing it differently now. Sarah, even if this works, it will work, but I need your help one more time. The determination in her voice was absolute. Remember what you taught me about complex repairs. Sometimes you have to step back and see the whole system. This isn't just about saving the garage or launching my prototype. It's about showing the world that the best innovations come from real people solving real problems. He found himself nodding, hope flickering to life in his chest. What do you need me to do? First, I need you to look at some drawings I'm sending. We've got 30 days to turn your garage into a showcase for the future of adaptive technology. Think we can handle it? Mike smiled, already reaching for his tools. No job too small, no dream too big, Sarah completed their mantra. Check. Your email. And Mike, we're going to fix this together. The bank notice lay forgotten on his desk as Mike opened Sarah's email, his mind already racing with possibilities. Sometimes, he realized, salvation came not in the form you expected, but in the form you'd helped create. The prototype blueprint dominated Mike's workbench, its blue lines glowing under the shop lights. Sarah had overnight shipped the full technical, drawings of the Heart's drive, and they were like nothing he'd ever seen. Yet in every innovative curve and clever mechanism, he could trace the echoes of their years working together. See this motor housing? Sarah's voice came through his phone speaker as they reviewed the designs together. Remember that Mustang's transmission we rebuilt 3 years ago? How we modified the fluid dynamics? You adapted that principle for the wheel drive system, Mike noted, his finger tracing the elegant solution. But you've added something here. He squinted at a series of complex notations. Adaptive learning algorithms, Sarah explained excitedly. The chair doesn't just move, it learns. Every user has different patterns, different needs. The system adapts to them, like how a good mechanic learns the quirks of a regular customer's car. Mike smiled at the analogy. Sarah was in Boston, finishing her semester, but they were spending hours each evening preparing the garage for the upcoming presentation. The blueprint had become their shared language, a bridge across the miles. The frame materials arrived today, he reported, glancing at the carefully packaged components. That new alloy you specified, it's lighter than anything I've worked with. But you'll notice the forming technique is similar to what we used on Mrs. Henderson's fender that time. Remember? When we couldn't afford a replacement panel. He did remember. They'd spent a weekend fabricating a custom piece, Sarah calculating stress points while Mike shaped the metal. Now those same principles were being applied to revolutionary medical technology. The blueprint detailed every aspect of the chair's construction. The adaptive suspension system that could adjust to any terrain, the intuitive control interface that could be customized for different abilities, the power management system that drew inspiration from hybrid car technology. But what struck Mike most was how each innovation served a clear purpose, making lives better. The investors are excited, Sarah continued, but they don't just want to see the technology. They want to see the story behind it. That's why doing this in the garage is so important. Every oil stain on that floor, every dent in the workbench, they're part of the journey. Mike looked around his shop, seeing it through new eyes. The space was transforming. They'd cleared one bay entirely, installing special lighting and demonstration areas. His old tool cabinet now housed precision instruments for the prototype assembly. But the heart of the garage, the smell of honest work, the sense of purpose, remained unchanged. I've been thinking about the control system, he said, pointing to a detailed section of the blueprint. If we modify the handle geometry here, it would give better feedback without compromising stability. Already on it, Sarah replied, and he could hear her grin. Check your email. A new sketch appeared on his phone, showing exactly the modification he'd envisioned but refined and enhanced. This had always been their strength, the fusion of his practical experience with her theoretical brilliance. They worked late into the night, Mike periodically sending photos of his progress while Sarah guided him through the more complex assemblies. The prototype was taking shape, each piece fitting together with satisfying precision. You know what this reminds me of? Sarah asked during a break. That first night when you fixed my wheelchair in the snow. You didn't just repair it, you improved it, made it better than it was before. That's what we're doing now, but for everyone who needs these chairs. Mike stepped back from the workbench, studying the blueprint that had become their roadmap to the future. In the margins, Sarah had written their old motto: no job too small, no dream too big. Below it, she'd added something new: from one snowy night to a brighter tomorrow. We're really doing this, aren't we? He said softly. We are, Sarah confirmed. And Mike, the investors don't just want to back the technology. They want to back the story, the process, the place where it all started. When they see how we developed this, working between your garage and MIT's labs, they'll understand that the best innovations come from bridging different worlds, Mike finished. Exactly. Now about that power distribution system, I had an idea based on that hybrid battery setup you showed me last summer. They dove back into the details, the blueprint continuing to evolve under their shared vision. Outside, the world was changing, but in Mike's garage, something timeless was taking shape, the product of experience, innovation, and most importantly, heart. The Tech Expo invitation sat propped against Mike's coffee mug, its embossed lettering catching the early morning light. Innovation in motion, breaking barriers in adaptive technology, was printed in elegant script, followed by tomorrow's date. Below that, in the featured presenters section, Sarah Thompson, The Heart's Drive, a revolution in personal mobility. Mike traced the raised letters with a calloused finger, remembering the day it had arrived. Sarah had called him immediately. It's really happening. They're giving us the main presentation slot. Now, the transformed garage hummed with nervous energy. The prototype gleamed under newly installed presentation lights, its surfaces reflecting the careful preparation of the past month. Every component had been checked and rechecked, every system tested to perfection. Run through it one more time. Sarah's voice came through the tablet propped on his workbench. She'd been video calling throughout the day, coordinating last-minute details from her dorm room while packing for tomorrow's flight. Safety systems, check, Mike began, moving through their familiar checklist. Adaptive controls, calibrated. Power management system, optimal. Emergency backup. He paused, frowning at a slight irregularity in the secondary power coupling. What is it? Sarah caught his expression even through the video feed. Probably nothing, but he adjusted his work light, examining the connection more closely. Remember that Ford Fusion with the intermittent electrical issue, the one where the problem only showed up under specific load conditions? Sarah was already pulling up technical diagrams on her end. You think the backup circuit might have a similar vulnerability? Could be. Better safe than sorry. Mike reached for his tools, the familiar weight of his father's wrench comforting in his hand. Walk me through the schematic. They spent the next hour fine-tuning the backup system, their collaborative rhythm as natural as ever despite the distance. Sarah guided him through the complex circuitry while he provided real-time feedback on the physical implementation. Just like old times, Sarah smiled, watching him make the final adjustments. Except tomorrow, instead of fixing one chair, we're going to change how they're all made. Mike sat back, wiping his hands on his shop rag. Your mother's flight gets in at 6 tonight. Yes, and my professor's team arrives early tomorrow. The investors are scheduled for 10. Sarah's voice held a mix of excitement and nerves. Mike, what if... None of that, he interrupted gently. Remember what I taught you about tough repairs? Focus on what you know, not what could go wrong, she recited, and he could hear her smile return. I just want this to work, not just for us, but for everyone who needs it. Mike looked around his garage, at the space that had been his life's work. Where the old tool cabinet had stood, now gleaming display panels showed the technical evolution of their design. His father's workbench had been transformed into a demonstration station, though he'd carefully preserved the worn spot where decades of elbows had polished the wood smooth. The invitation seemed to glow in the morning light, a promise of things to come. But it was more than just a ticket to a presentation. It was validation of every late night they'd spent problem-solving, every creative repair they'd attempted, every moment they'd pushed the boundaries of what was possible. "Sarah," he said, picking up the invitation, "remember the night I found you in the snow?" "Of course." "I thought I was just fixing a broken wheelchair. Instead, I was meeting the person who would help me fix everything." He cleared his throat, emotion threatening to overtake him. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know—" "I do know," she cut in softly. "And after tomorrow, everyone else will know too. Not just about the technology, but about the heart behind it. About a mechanic who taught a girl that limitations are just problems waiting for solutions." They shared a moment of understanding, the kind that needed no words. Then Sarah straightened, her expression turning businesslike. "Now, about your speech." "My what?" "Did I forget to mention? The investors want to hear from both of us. Can't tell the story of the heart's drive without its heart, right?" Mike glanced at his reflection in the prototype's polished surface, his work shirt with its years of honest wear, the grey hair he'd earned helping others stay mobile, the eyes that had seen countless problems and found ways to fix them all. "Well then," he said, picking up the invitation one last time, "we'd better make it good." The presentation remote felt small in Mike's weathered hands as he watched the garage fill with people. Investors in tailored suits mingled with MIT professors, while local reporters set up cameras near the prototype. Sarah had positioned herself by the entrance, greeting each arrival with professional poise, though he could see her fingers fidgeting with her chair's controls, her telltale sign of nervousness. Claire stood beside him, radiant with pride. "Look at all these people," she whispered. "They're here to see what you two built together." Mike nodded, his throat tight. The garage had never looked like this. The old fluorescent lights replaced with professional staging, the walls lined with development timeline displays, the prototype taking center stage where countless oil changes had once been performed. Yet somehow it still felt like home. 2 minutes, Sarah announced, wheeling over to them. She wore a blazer over her MIT shirt, professional but authentic. "Remember the signal?" Mike patted the remote in his pocket. "1 click when you reach. The part about initial inspiration, 2 clicks for the technical breakdown. And 3 clicks for the big moment," Sarah finished, her eyes shining. "Mike, thank you for everything." Before he could respond, the MIT program director stepped forward, calling for attention. The crowd settled, all eyes turning towards Sarah as she took her position beside the prototype. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice clear and confident, "what you're about to see began on a snowy night in this very garage. But to understand where we're going, you need to know where we started. 1 click of the remote, and the first display illuminated. A photo of Sarah's original wheelchair, damaged and cold in the winter storm." Mike watched the audience lean forward as Sarah described that night, painting a picture of desperation turned to hope. "But this isn't just a story about one repair," she continued. "It's about reimagining what's possible when practical experience meets theoretical innovation." 2 clicks. The technical displays came to life, showing the evolution of their design. Sarah moved through the specifications with practiced ease, fielding complex questions from the engineers while making the concepts accessible to the investors. "The adaptive learning algorithm draws from real-world experience," she explained, highlighting the control system. "Just as a skilled mechanic learns to diagnose problems by sound and feel, the heart's drive learns its users' patterns and preferences." Mike watched the investors' expressions shift from polite interest to genuine excitement. One of them, a woman in a sharp business suit, was taking rapid notes on her tablet. "But seeing is believing," Sarah announced, wheeling toward the prototype. "And for this demonstration, I'd like to invite someone special to help me. The man who not only saved my life that winter night, but showed me that true innovation comes from understanding the human heart as well as the mechanical systems." 3 clicks. The lights focused on Mike as he stepped forward, just as they'd practiced. But Sarah had one surprise left. "Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Anderson isn't just a small-town mechanic. He's a master problem solver who taught me that every limitation is just a challenge waiting for a solution. And today, he's also my business partner." Mike's head snapped up. This wasn't in the script. Sarah's eyes met his, full of certainty and affection. The Heart's Drive isn't just a product, it's a philosophy. One that Mike lived every day in this garage, fixing cars for whatever people could afford, treating every problem as worthy of his full attention. That's why our company's first manufacturing and development facility will be right here, transforming this space into a center for adaptive technology innovation. The investor in the business suit was nodding appreciatively. Mike could see others making quick calculations, recognizing the story's marketing potential alongside the technical innovation. "Now," Sarah continued, "let me show you what the Heart's Drive can really do." For the next 20 minutes, she put the prototype through its paces. The chair negotiated obstacles, adapted to different surfaces, demonstrated its learning capabilities. But it was more than a technical showcase. It was a symphony of everything they'd built together, every late-night repair session, every creative solution, every shared triumph. When Sarah finally concluded, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic. The investor in the suit was already moving forward, hand-extended business card at the ready, but Mike barely noticed. He was looking at the presentation remote in his hand, this small device that had helped them tell their story. Like every tool in his garage, it had served its purpose perfectly. And like every repair he'd ever made, it had helped someone move forward into a better future. The headlines spread across Mike's desk like fallen autumn leaves, each one telling a different part of their story. The local paper had run first. "Small-town mechanic and MIT student revolutionize wheelchair design." Below it lay the Boston Globe's technology section, "The Heart's Drive, How a Snowy Night Sparked Innovation." The Wall Street Journal had picked it up next. "Tech investors flocked to garage-born mobility solution." Mike sipped his morning coffee, still instant, still in the chipped mug, as he read through them again. The phone hadn't stopped ringing since the presentation 3 days ago. Sarah had hired a professional to handle the calls, but still insisted Mike listen to the most important ones. "Mike," Sarah wheeled through the garage door, waving yet another newspaper. "Have you seen the Times?" He shook his head, making space on his desk as she spread out the New York Times innovation section. The headline made his coffee catch in his throat. "From breakdown to breakthrough, the mechanical poetry of the Heart's Drive." "They get it," Sarah said softly, reading aloud from the article. "In an age of Silicon Valley startups and sterile corporate labs, true innovation emerged from an unlikely partnership between a small-town mechanic and his determined protégé. The Heart's Drive isn't just a technological advancement, it's a testament to the power of practical wisdom meeting theoretical brilliance." The reporter had spent hours interviewing them both, particularly fascinated by their development process. The article detailed how they'd combined Mike's decades of mechanical experience with Sarah's cutting-edge engineering knowledge, creating something neither could have achieved alone. "Look at this part." Mike pointed to a quote from one of the MIT professors. "What makes the Heart's Drive revolutionary isn't just its adaptive technology, but the human-centered design philosophy behind it. Every feature reflects a deep understanding of real-world needs, informed by years of hands-on experience." Sarah beamed, but her expression turned serious as she pulled out another paper from her bag. "The medical journal coverage is starting to come in too." She handed him a printout from a prestigious rehabilitation medicine publication. They want to do clinical trials, real scientific validation of everything we've been working toward. Mike scanned the dense medical terminology, focusing on the conclusion: potential to fundamentally transform mobility assistance and user independence. A knock at the garage door interrupted them. A delivery man stood there, looking uncertain. "I've got 37 more media requests for interviews and something from the governor's office." Sarah laughed at Mike's overwhelmed expression. "Don't worry, I've got a system for handling all this, but there's one piece of mail you need to see yourself." She pulled an envelope from her jacket pocket, the bank's logo clearly visible. In the corner, Mike's heart skipped, remembering the foreclosure notice that had started all this. With slightly shaking hands, he opened the letter. "Dear Mr. Anderson," he read aloud, "in light of recent developments and your new partnership agreement with Thompson Adaptive Technologies, we are pleased to withdraw all pending actions regarding your property. Furthermore, we would be honored to discuss expansion financing for your facility." He had to stop, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. Sarah reached over and squeezed his hand. "We did it, Mike. Really did it." Another headline caught his eye: "Local Hero, How Mike Anderson's Compassion Sparked a Technology Revolution." The article included interviews with his longtime customers, Mrs. Henderson talking about the payment plans that had kept her mobile, the Martinez family describing how he'd kept their car running through their child's cancer treatments. "You know what all these headlines miss?" Sarah asked, gathering the papers into a neat pile. "They focus on the technology, the business success, the feel-good story, but they don't really capture what happened in this garage over the years. How many lives you touched, one repair at a time." Mike looked around at his garage, now humming with new energy. The old tool cabinet still stood in its corner, but beside it sat boxes of prototype components. The workbench where he'd taught Sarah about transmissions now held advanced testing equipment. Yet the heart of the place, the spirit of helping others move forward, remained unchanged. "You're wrong about one thing," he said finally. "These headlines don't miss it completely. Look," he pointed to the smallest article from their local paper's community section. "Anderson Auto Repair, where every fix makes a difference." Sarah smiled, understanding. Among all the national coverage and business news, this simple truth stood out. Sometimes the biggest innovations start with the smallest acts of kindness. The partnership agreement lay open on Mike's desk, its legal language a stark contrast to the simple handshake deals he'd built his business on. 50 pages of corporate terminology, equity distributions, and operational protocols. Yet one clause stood out, handwritten in Sarah's neat engineer's script. "Anderson Auto Repair will continue to serve its existing community customers at rates they can afford, subsidized by Thompson Adaptive Technologies." The lawyers weren't happy about that addition, Sarah said from across the desk, smiling at the memory. "Said it wasn't standard business practice." "Since when have we cared about standard?" Mike replied, signing his name beside hers. The pen felt strange in his hand. Too expensive, too corporate. A gift from one of their new investors. The garage around them was in transition, caught between what it had been and what it was becoming. New manufacturing equipment shared space with familiar tools. Professional technicians in pressed uniforms worked alongside Mike's longtime customers-turned-employees. Mrs. Henderson's son, who'd grown up watching Mike fix their family car, was now learning to assemble prototype components. The production schedule looks good, Sarah continued, wheeling to the new digital display board that tracked their orders. "But we've got growing pains. Quality control flagged some inconsistencies in the latest batch." Mike nodded, already reaching for his work jacket. "Show me." They moved through the expanded workspace, Sarah explaining the technical issues while Mike observed the assembly process. He stopped at one station, watching a young technician struggle with a motor housing alignment. "Here," Mike said gently, pulling up a stool. "Let me show you something I learned fixing transmissions." His weathered hands guided the younger man's, demonstrating how to feel for the proper alignment. "Sometimes the best quality control is right here in your fingertips." Sarah watched, taking notes on her tablet. "We should document these techniques," she mused. "Integrate them into the training program." A commotion at the front office interrupted them. Claire, now their office manager, was trying to mediate between an insistent man in an expensive suit and one of their regular customers. "I don't care about your corporate appointment," the man was saying. "I represent 3 major medical equipment distributors, and we need to discuss bulk ordering now. And my daughter needs her wheelchair fixed now," the customer replied quietly. "We've been coming to Mike for years." Mike stepped forward, but Sarah was already moving. "Gentlemen," she addressed the businessman, "I believe your appointment is with me. Let's talk in the conference room, the one we specifically built for meetings like this." She turned to the customer. "And Mike will take care of your daughters." "A chair right away, won't you, Mike?" "Already on it," Mike replied, grabbing his toolbox. This at least was familiar territory. Later, after the businessman had left with a signed preliminary agreement, and the young girl was happily testing her repaired wheelchair, Sarah found Mike in his office. He was studying the partnership agreement again. "Having second thoughts?" she asked softly. "No," he said slowly, "just remembering something my father told me when I took over the garage. He said, 'Success isn't about how much money you make, it's about how many people you help along the way.'" Sarah wheeled closer, pointing to another clause in the agreement. "All design improvements must be tested and approved by both partners." She grinned. "That's lawyer speak for Mike needs to make sure it actually helps real people." The phone rang. Another investor. Another opportunity. But before Mike could reach for it, Sarah grabbed his arm. "You know why I insisted on keeping the auto repair business running alongside the new production?" she asked. "Because every car you fix, every person you help, reminds us why we're doing this. The heart's drive isn't just about mobility technology, it's about heart. Your heart, Mike. The one that couldn't leave a girl in the snow, that can't turn away anyone who needs help." Mike looked at the agreement again, seeing beyond the legal jargon to what it really represented. A blueprint for keeping their values intact while growing their dream. Every clause, every stipulation was designed to protect not just their business interests, but their principles. "We're going to need a bigger coffee maker," he said finally, making Sarah laugh. "And maybe some fancier mugs for the investors. But keep your chipped one," she insisted. "It's part of our origin story now." Through the office window, they watched their old garage and new factory working in harmony, much like the practical wisdom and innovative technology that had brought them here. The partnership agreement might have been written in corporate language, but its heart was pure Anderson Auto Repair. No job too small, no dream too big. The modern tool set gleamed in its climate-controlled cabinet, each piece precision-engineered and laser-calibrated. Next to it, deliberately preserved in its worn leather pouch, lay Mike's father's old wrench set. The contrast between them told the story of Anderson Auto Repair's transformation better than any words could. "The new diagnostic equipment arrives tomorrow," Sarah announced, wheeling up to where Mike stood contemplating the tools. "But I made sure they left this corner untouched." She patted the scarred workbench that had been her first classroom. "Remember your first lesson here?" Mike asked, picking up one of the old wrenches. Its wooden handle was smooth from decades of use, the metal worn, but still true. "Every tool tells you what it's doing, if you learn to listen," Sarah quoted. She reached into the new cabinet, lifting out a digital torque wrench. "These new ones just speak a different language." The garage around them hummed with activity. The main floor had been divided into 2 distinct but interconnected spaces. On one side, the traditional auto repair business continued, now equipped with state-of-the-art lifts and diagnostic systems. On the other, the Hearts Drive production facility pushed the boundaries of adaptive technology. "Mr. Anderson," a young technician approached, holding a tablet. "We're having trouble calibrating the new assembly robot. The tolerance levels keep shifting during the final alignment phase. Mike smiled, remembering similar problems from his early days. Let me show you something. He led them to his old workbench, picking up both the modern torque wrench and his father's basic one. Sometimes you need both perspectives to solve a problem. For the next hour, he demonstrated how traditional mechanical principles could inform the latest technology. The technician took careful notes as Mike explained how the feel of a proper alignment translated into digital readings, how years of hands-on experience could help interpret automated diagnostics. It's like speaking two languages, Sarah observed, watching the lesson, and you're teaching them to be bilingual. Later, as the afternoon sun slanted through the newly installed skylights, Mike walked through his transformed workspace. The old oil stains on the concrete floor had been covered with specialized anti-static coating, but he could still trace their outlines in his memory. Each mark had been a lesson, a repair, a problem solved. The new tool set had its own wisdom to share. Its precision instruments made possible the exacting standards required for medical device manufacturing. The robotic assembly systems ensured consistency that human hands alone couldn't match. But it was the integration of old and new that made their operation special. "Mike!" Claire called from the office. "The training center plans are ready for review." He made his way to the conference room, still strange to have one of those, where Sarah was already studying the blueprints. The plans showed their next expansion. A teaching facility where experienced mechanics could learn to work with adaptive technology, and engineering students could get hands-on experience with practical repairs. "See this section?" Sarah pointed to a central workspace. "It's modeled after your old setup, but with modern additions. Every student will learn on both old and new tools, just like I did." Mike traced the layout with a calloused finger. "You've included a community service bay." "Of course." Sarah grinned. "Can't forget where we came from. One side will handle traditional auto repair for those who need it, while the other will provide wheelchair maintenance and modifications, all part of the training program." The sound of laughter drew their attention to the main floor. One of the senior technicians was demonstrating to a group of new hires how to calibrate the assembly line. He had both the modern diagnostic tablet and an old timing light, showing how understanding the basic principles made the advanced technology more effective. "You know what I love most about all this?" Sarah said softly. "Every person who walks through those doors, whether they're here to fix their car or build the next generation of adaptive devices, they all learn the same lesson I did that snowy night." "What's that?" "That the most important tool in any garage isn't the fanciest wrench or the most expensive diagnostic system." She reached out and squeezed his hand. "It's the heart of the person using it." Mike looked again at the two tool sets. Old and new, each valuable in its own way. Like the garage itself, they represented not just the evolution of technology, but the enduring value of experience, compassion, and the simple desire to help others move forward. "Well," he said, picking up both his father's wrench and the digital torque meter, "let's go teach them how to use both." The original wheelchair part hung in a simple frame on their new office wall, the broken caster assembly that had failed on that snowy night years ago. Below it, a small plaque read, "Where Heart Meets Drive, the part that started it all." It was Sarah's idea to display it, a reminder of their beginnings amid their growing success. "First production run is complete," Sarah announced, wheeling into the office. She placed a tablet on Mike's desk, showing quality control reports from their initial batch of Heart's drive chairs. 100 units, all meeting or exceeding specifications. Mike looked up from the maintenance manual he was helping simplify. "Any feedback from the test users?" "See for yourself." Sarah pulled up a video on the larger screen. A young girl, perhaps 12, was navigating her Heart's drive chair through a park. The adaptive suspension smoothly handled the transition from pavement to grass, while the intuitive controls responded to her subtle movements. But it was her smile that caught Mike's attention. The same joy of independence he'd seen on Sarah's face countless times. "That's Jessica," Sarah explained. "She was born with cerebral palsy. Before this, she needed constant assistance outdoors. Now, she gestured to the screen, where Jessica was confidently keeping up with her running friends. Mike stood and walked to the framed caster, touching its glass cover gently. "From breakdown to breakthrough," he murmured, quoting that first New York Times headline. "There's more," Sarah said, her voice tender. "Show him, Mom." Claire entered from the outer office carrying a stack of letters. "These came in this morning, from families of our first users." Mike sat down to read them, each one telling a story of lives transformed. A teenager who could now navigate school hallways without help. An elderly man returning to his beloved gardening. A mother of 3 who could finally chase her toddler. "Around the yard. Remember what you told me about complex repairs?" Sarah asked, moving to join him at the desk. "How sometimes you have to step back and see the whole system." Mike nodded, still absorbed in the letters. "Well, look at the whole system we've created here." She gestured around them. The office windows overlooked both the production floor and the original garage bays. "Every Hearts drive we make carries part of your legacy, not just the technical solutions, but the philosophy behind them." As if to illustrate her point, they watched through the window as one of their veteran mechanics paused in his auto repair work to help a wheelchair user adjust their seat position. The mechanic used the same careful attention he gave to engine timing, the same respect for the importance of mobility. "The investors called again," Sarah continued. "They want to double production, open facilities in other cities." She paused, watching his reaction. "I told them yes, but with conditions." Mike raised an eyebrow. "Each new facility has to maintain a community service component, just like we do here. And," she smiled, "each one needs someone like you. A master mechanic who understands that sometimes the most important fixes aren't about machinery at all." "Speaking of fixes," Claire interrupted, "there's someone here you both need to meet." She ushered in a woman and her young son, who sat in a standard wheelchair, much like Sarah's old one. The boy's chair showed signs of careful but limited maintenance, zip ties and duct tape holding certain parts together. Mike and Sarah exchanged a glance, recognition hitting them both at once. "Hi," the boy said shyly. "My mum says you might be able to help. My chair's been acting up and we can't afford—" "Say no more," Mike said, already reaching for his tools, both old and new. "Sarah, want to help me show him how we do things here?" For the next hour, they worked together, teaching the boy about his chair while upgrading it with some of their newer components. Mike used his father's old wrench to demonstrate basic maintenance principles, while Sarah explained how their new technology could help prevent future problems. Above them, the framed caster watched over the scene, a reminder that every breakdown could lead to a breakthrough, that every repair could open new possibilities, that every act of kindness could spark a revolution. "There you go," Mike said, finally helping the boy test his improved chair. "How's that feel?" The boy's face lit up as he experimentally wheeled around the room, his movement smoother and more confident. "It's amazing! Mom, look!" Sarah caught Mike's eye, both of them remembering another winter evening and another wheelchair repair that had changed everything. The boy's smile, his mother's tears of gratitude. It was all wonderfully familiar. "No job too small," Sarah whispered. "No dream too big," Mike finished, his hand resting on the frame that held their beginning. The new company logo dominated the wall of their training center. A stylized heart interwoven with mechanical gears, incorporating Mike's original garage sign into its design. Below it, the words, "The Heart's Drive, where compassion meets innovation," were inscribed in both standard text and braille. It was more than just corporate branding. It was a mission statement cast in metal and light. "The foundation paperwork is finished," Sarah announced, reviewing documents on her tablet. "The Anderson-Thompson Initiative for Adaptive Innovation is officially launched." Mike looked up from where he was demonstrating transmission principles to a group of engineering students. The class was part of their new program, a partnership between local technical schools and major universities, bridging the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical experience. "Did you see who applied for the first round of grants?" Sarah continued, wheeling closer. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. "Remember Tommy Walsh, Betty's son, the one with the dead battery that morning?" Mike smiled at the memory. He must be, in college now? Graduate school, biomedical engineering at Stanford. Sarah pulled up his application. "He's developing a new type of prosthetic limb, using some of the same adaptive principles we pioneered. Says he was inspired by watching you fix cars all those years. How you always found a way to keep people moving." The training center hummed with activity around them. In one corner, experienced mechanics taught engineering students the feel of proper calibration. In another, engineering professors helped mechanics understand the theoretical principles behind their practical knowledge. The logo watched over them all, its intertwined heart and gears reflecting their unified purpose. "The next round of mobility scholarships is ready for review too," Sarah said. They'd established a fund to provide Hearts Drive chairs to those who couldn't afford them, along with training and maintenance support. "And the Young Inventors program starts next month." That had been Mike's idea, creating opportunities for kids who, like Sarah, had the vision to see beyond limitations. The program would provide resources, mentorship, and a chance to develop their innovations in a supportive environment. "Mr. Anderson," a young woman approached, her Hearts Drive chair moving smoothly across the training center floor. "I'm Maria Martinez. You used to fix my parents' car when I was little. The radiator replacement," Mike remembered, "during your brother's treatment." She nodded, smiling. "That's right. I'm here to interview for the technical training position. I just finished my mechanical engineering degree." Mike and Sarah exchanged proud glances. This was exactly what they'd hoped for, their work inspiring the next generation to carry forward their mission. "Well then," Mike said, picking up both an old wrench and a modern diagnostic tablet, "let's see what you know about combining old-school wisdom with new technology." As they worked through the practical assessment, more students gathered to watch. The logo's light caught the metal tools, casting gentle shadows that danced across the floor. Each shadow seemed to tell a story of a snowy night and a broken wheelchair, of a garage that became a sanctuary, of a partnership that transformed an industry. "You know what I love about our logo?" Sarah said later as they reviewed Maria's impressive performance. "It's not just about us. It's about everyone who comes through these doors, everyone who learns to see possibilities instead of problems." Mike nodded, watching another group of students arrive for afternoon training. Some wore medical scrubs, others coveralls. Some used wheelchairs, others walked. But they all shared the same look of purpose he'd seen in Sarah's eyes all those years ago. "The heart comes first in the design," he observed, studying the logo. "Before the gears, before the technology." "Just like in our story," Sarah agreed. "The compassion came first, the innovation followed." Through the windows, they could see their expanded facility stretching into the distance. The original garage still stood at its heart, now surrounded by modern manufacturing plants and research laboratories. But every new building, every program, every innovation carried the same spirit that had driven Mike to stop on a snowy night to help a stranger. "Tomorrow's board meeting should be interesting," Sarah mused. "The investors want to discuss global expansion." Mike smiled, remembering simpler days of coffee-stained ledgers and creative payment plans. "As long as we keep the heart driving the gears," he said, "we'll go exactly where we need to be." Above them, the logo seemed to pulse with possibility, its blend of old and new, compassion and innovation, lighting the way forward for generations to come. The wall of thank you letters had grown to cover an entire section of the original garage, each one telling a story of lives transformed. Some were handwritten on lined paper, others typed with careful precision. Children's drawings mixed with professional photographs, all sharing the same message. Because of Mike and Sarah's work, someone's world had grown larger. "This one's my favorite," Sarah said, touching a worn envelope near the center. It was her own letter to Mike, written the day after he'd found her in the snow. The paper had yellowed with age, but the words remained clear. "Thank you for teaching me that broken things can be fixed, and limitations are just problems waiting for solutions." Mike stood beside her, both of them reflecting on their journey. Through the windows, they could see their expanded facility alive with purpose. Engineers and mechanics working side by side, new innovations taking shape. Lives being changed one repair at a time. A young girl in a Hearts Drive wheelchair rolled up to them, holding a fresh letter. "Can I add mine to the wall?" she asked, eyes bright with hope. "Your chair helped me start dance classes last month." "Of course," Mike smiled, lifting her up so she could pin her letter among the others. "Right here next to the very first one." Sarah watched the scene, remembering when she'd been that girl. Scared, limited, until a kind mechanic showed her what was possible. Now their work had touched thousands of lives, each letter on the wall representing a person who could move more freely through the world. "You know what all these really say?" she asked softly, gesturing to the wall of letters. "They say that one person's compassion can change everything, that when heart meets drive, there's no limit to what's possible." Mike nodded, his hand resting on his father's old wrench that now hung beside the letters. "No job too small, no dream too big," Sarah finished, their shared motto echoing through years of partnership and purpose. Outside, snow began to fall, gentle flakes drifting past the windows, just like that fateful night. But now, instead of isolation and fear, the snow brought a sense of completion. Their story had come full circle, and yet it was still beginning, lived out in every life. They touched every barrier they helped overcome. The young girl wheeled back to join her dance class, her Hearts Drive chair moving with graceful precision. Mike and Sarah watched her go, seeing in her movement the future they'd built together, a future where mobility meant freedom, where compassion drove innovation, and where no one would be left alone in the snow. "Ready for tomorrow?" Sarah asked, knowing there would always be more problems to solve, more lives to touch. Mike smiled, looking at the wall of letters that told their story better than any business report or technical manual ever could. "With you, always." Above them, the letters rustled gently, each one a reminder that the greatest journeys often start with a simple act of kindness, and the biggest revolutions begin with a single heart willing to help.